Good afternoon, everybody. I'm back with another video today talking about the Tier 10 German tank destroyer, the Grille 15. It's been a little bit, so a little bit of an apologies to you guys. I don't have too much of a fancy reason as to why it's been a couple days, other than I simply just kind of got burnt on World of Tanks. We all kind of have those periods of time where the games aren't going our way, the game becomes a bit too frustrating, and we're not just having fun with playing tanks and blowing tanks up, which is kind of the point of video games, you know. If we're not having fun, then really what is kind of the point of playing the game? And that combined with the fact that I started doing a little bit of school stuff on the side has kept me pretty busy, and that combined with me just not enjoying the game all that much has meant that my free time has been going to other games and other hobbies. Recently did another playthrough of Dragon Age Inquisition and started one on Dragon Age 2. Really love those older titles. If you guys have played those games, I'm sure you understand they're really good titles. But enough of that. Today we're talking about a fairly old Tier 10 German tank destroyer, the Grille 15. Certainly not the oldest German Tier 10 tank destroyer in the game. You have the Grille 15, you have the Jagdpanzer 100, which was the original, and then you also have the Waffenträger 100, which was kind of the tank that this was supposed to replace. And I say replace lightly because they didn't take the Waffenträger E100 out of World of Tanks console like they did on the PC version and made that a really kind of weird, special, fancy, limited time event tank kind of a thing. I'm not really sure how it works, and I'll keep up with PC as closely as some people do. But this was the third German Tier 10 tank destroyer, and I believe there's another one that was released a couple seasons ago. It's that really kind of fast one. I completely forget the name. The Canonian Jagdpanzer something or another. Kind of looks like a main battle tank, which plays completely different to any of the other German tank destroyers. So the thing when it was introduced was fairly different than what it is today. The thing that really made this tank kind of unique and stand out compared to, say, the Jagdpanzer E100 and the Waffenträger E100 is that it was more of a standardized tank destroyer and tank destroyer gun, because the Jagdpanzer E100 was all about crazy armor, crazy alpha damage, 1050. It was never actually the most alpha damage in this version of the game. It came to the game the same time that the FV2 and 5V183 did, which was, I believe, at release. So both those were in the game, and that thing has 1050 alpha damage, and we all know the Death Star has a bit more than that, but monstrous alpha damage, crazy pen, 299 standard on the Jagdpanzer 100, as well as the ludicrous and still to this day highest penetration in the game at 420 millimeters of heat penetration, which is kind of a joke, kind of a meme, and that's what that tank's all about. And then you had the Waffenträger 100. That tank was also kind of all about its firepower, and in a different way, the Jagdpanzer 100, because as anyone knows, the Waffenträger has an autoloader, and it has a very big autoloader. It's not like a 120 mil autoloader that you see on tanks like a T-57 Heavy or a Foch, something like that. It has a 128 millimeter autoloader with 560 alpha, as well as a 150 millimeter autoloader with 750 alpha. So that tank is really scary if you turn a corner and it catches you. This was a very different kind of tank destroyer. It had a very kind of modest, considering what tank destroyers were in the game at the time, 750 alpha damage. And it also didn't have any crazy hyper penetration. To this day, it still has the same penetration values as when it came out. As a tier 10 tank destroyer, it's actually pretty far on the low end of penetration. This tank gun has 279 millimeters of standard armor piercing penetration. And that means that there's going to be a couple times where you're going to be facing some heavily armored targets, even as a tier 10 tank destroyer, and you're going to want to load premium. And since we're talking about premium rounds, this tank also doesn't have crazy premium rounds. It has a healthy but not spectacular 330 millimeters of heat penetration. And, in terms of tier 10 tank destroyers, when you have crazy machines, we already talked about the Jagdpanzer 100 with its 420 millimeters of heat penetration, as well as you have other tanks like the Americans, the T-110E4, for instance, with 375 APCR pen. This thing is kind of lacking when it comes to its penetration. And I also just, on a quick side note, before I keep talking about the tank, just wanted to show this first game off because, as we're going to discuss, this tank doesn't always simply have to be sitting in the back of the map sniping, you can actually use mobility and use your hit points to play forward and play kind of aggressive. This is a fairly small map, and you wouldn't think you'd get a great result with this kind of a machine on it. But if you play smart, you can definitely do well, which is one of the reasons I really like this machine. And we're certainly going to talk about it quite a bit. So your penetration for standard rounds and your premium rounds is, well, distinctly okay in terms of tier 10 tank destroyers. And your alpha damage isn't particularly phenomenal either. At 750, you have so many tank destroyers with 850 alpha and 1000 plus damage. You know, why would people want to choose this tank? Well, there's a couple reasons. So this tank, as you saw there with the mobility at the end of that first game, is the most mobile of those aforementioned tier 10 German tank destroyers. This thing will easily go over 60 kilometers an hour on a slight downslope, and I think it's around 60 kilometers an hour on the flat. You are a very fast tank destroyer. You're not as slow and cumbersome as the Jagdpanzer. And the Waffenträger 100, while it's not horrifically slow, it's definitely not fast, and also has no armor at all whatsoever, just like this thing, but you're also slow. So that's a really hard combination to make work with that tank. Here you can really kind of, stretch the legs with the machine, get around the map when it calls for it, get to different positions, and take people by surprise. So, definitely a machine you want to think quite a bit with in terms of what positions you want to take, because you can reach so many different positions with it because of its awesome mobility. And the other kind of distinct strength it had was it has a really accurate gun. Of all those machines that I talked about earlier, this has the most accurate gun amongst them all. Even though the Waffenträger does have some pretty impressive accuracy, it has that accuracy on a 560 alpha gun, albeit an autoloader. This thing has incredible accuracy and aim time on a 150 millimeter gun with 750 alpha damage. Now you see here the bloom is kind of ridiculous. So when I talk about accuracy and aim time, don't mistake this thing for a medium tank. If you're firing on the move, this machine will let you down tremendously. The on the move accuracy is still tank destroyer levels, which means it's really not good whatsoever. But what it does mean is once you are stopped and start to aim, as you saw there, you can get aimed very quick. And when you are fully aimed, you are still very accurate, which is incredibly enjoyable and satisfying. When this gun works, you feel like you just can't miss any shots. And to go with the kind of okay alpha damage to 750, it actually has a pretty good rate of fire. You see here with my current build, food and rammer and vent, or I don't know if you could fit vents, but my crew on this thing, my reload time is sitting at about 13.2 seconds with food activated, which is a really good rate of fire for 750 alpha. Again, you're not slinging rounds out like a autoloading U100, Waffenträger U100, excuse me, but you can definitely put out some pain and punishment. And 750, I mean, it still hurts. It's a good amount of alpha damage. We'll talk about alpha in the game, broadly speaking, in a little bit, but you had a really great, good handling gun. And to go with it, with the good accuracy and aim time, you also have really good shell velocity. These are only AP rounds, they're not APCR, but you have well over, I think it's either 1,000 or over 1,000 meters per second shell velocity, which means making long range shots is really easy with this gun. And it really suits its play style. You see me in the beginning of these games, even though I talked about the mobility and how you can play in forward positions, you really don't want to do that unless the game calls for it. When you're playing this tank, you really have to play it slow at the beginning because you need to know where the enemies are, where their vision is at, more importantly, as well as where your team is going, and then you can kind of figure out what positions are available. You saw at the start of this game, I headed down to that southern corner where that medium and tank destroyer at, and I eventually saw there wasn't really much headed that way per se at the time. So then I quickly relocated to this position and got a quick 2,500 damage and 1 kill out of it. So repositioning with the mobility of this thing is great. As well, you also have some pretty solid stealth on this machine. It's not best in class by any means, and in some ways you would kind of hope that it would be better considering what this machine is, but if you definitely need the build for camo, and then if you play smart, especially with concealment, you'd be kind of surprised with how well you can and there's look at that accuracy. I mean, I saw a sliver of his turret over, what was that, like 400 meters, 350 meters, something like that. Man, I mean, this gun when it works, it's really satisfying. So those are kind of the strengths of it. You're a fast, stealthy tank destroyer with a very accurate, high damaging gun that still has some pretty good DPM. What are the drawbacks? Well, if anyone knows the Grill 15 or even just looking at it, you have no armor. And when I say no armor, I don't mean no armor the way like a AMX 50B does, where yeah, you don't have armor, but sometimes you got to ricochet. No, you have. I think the thickest armor on this thing is 20 millimeters or maybe 30 millimeters. If a shell hits you, it's going to penetrate, and you know you will get penned by HE by pretty much any tank in the game that you're going to meet. I can't really think of. I mean, maybe there's some really low pen HE, like 90 millimeter HE that has like 45 pen. If you see one of those tanks, you can maybe consider angling if he's firing HE and conceivably bounce a shot. But if you like a well armored tank destroyer, this is not the machine for you. Unfortunately, it effectively sacrifices all of its armor to gain that hypermobility and that really nice handling gun. And the other thing to go with it, we kind of talked about already, is the gun handling is it leaves a lot to be desired on the move because there's going to be times where you forget that you're not a medium tank because you're rolling around so quick and you're stealthy and you're going to want to get a snapshot of the guy even at 50 meters away the side of I don't know a conqueror or something and you pull the trigger and all of a sudden there goes your shot right into the ground or into the sky or behind you and hits a team. I mean this thing on the move is about as useful as like a Type 5 heavy on the move. It's not a good handling gun if that's what you're trying to do. So don't treat it like a medium tank. Treat it truly as a tank destroyer that lets you aim quickly, stop and aim your shots, and only snap if you absolutely have to. And the last thing that's really unfortunate, well, there's last two kind of things that are pretty big weaknesses that are substantial for this tank. The first being, you can see right here, is the reverse speed. This tank desperately wants to shoot and then get into cover quickly because if you do get spotted, as you saw there, you're going to take damage. It's just the nature of the game. Unless they miss or like hit your gun without anything behind it, like the rest of your tank, it just passes through the gun barrel. You're not bouncing anything. You're going to get hit and you're going to take damage. And when you shoot and try to reverse, this thing goes like 14 kilometers backwards, which is really slow. And especially considering how fast this thing is in a straight line, that reverse speed is really kind of disappointing. And as well to solidify the fact that you're not a medium, your whole traverse in this thing is so slow. You can't really circle tanks as fast as you are in this machine. If you try to circle a heavy tank to death or anything for that matter with this, you're not going to beat their turret and hull rotation. You might be able to if you track them, but your reload's good, but it's still 14 seconds give or take. That's not good enough to keep guys perma-tracked. So you really have to be very careful and continuously remind yourself you're not a light tank, you're not a medium tank. Playing those circling rolls or what have you, it's just not what you're meant to do in this machine. So one of the ways you can get around that, the ways you get around it have actually emerged from one of the most significant buffs this thing's ever received, which is it has a fully rotating 360-degree turret. And that wasn't always the case. When this thing was released into the game, it had a good but remarkably, I guess, this tank destroyer gun trooper is no other way to put it. If you don't have a turret, you don't have a turret. And you had a pretty decent arc of fire, maybe about 20, 25 degrees each side, which made its gun troopers not bad for a tank destroyer, but at the end of the day, you are still a tank destroyer. And Wargaming finally saw to change that. And one of the most significant reasons, if you didn't know, is kind of the controversy that came out with another machine in the game, and that machine is the Tehran. So the Tehran was a kind of a Russian version of what this tank wants to be, except better in every conceivable way. It was way, way, way more stealthy. It was pretty much just as quick. It was the same kind of tank destroyer with basically no camo whatsoever, but really, really fast and a hard hitting gun. And its gun was just way better. It had more standard penetration. I think it has like 395 millimeters of heat penetration to go along with it. And it had 950 alpha damage, and it still had good DPM. You barely had a slower reload in the Grille 15. And it had a 360-degree rotating turret on top of it. So if you cared about balance in the game and you weren't just a player who wanted to roll out and blow up tanks, which again, nothing wrong with that. If you put these tanks side by side, you couldn't help but ask the question, why the hell would you play a Grille 15 when the Tron exists in the game? It's simply a better machine. It's the same type of machine and has better stats, and it's pretty much better in every single way. And the answer was a resounding shoulder shrug. I don't know. Why would you play the Grille 15 when the Tron's in the game? So they did kind of get around to it before the big Tehran nerf that kind of put it in line with the rest of the tank destroyers as opposed to being one of the most toxic tanks in the game. And that really changed how you could play because um that aforementioned slow reverse speed on this tank was kind of no longer a factor because you could do things like what you see I'm doing here. You see I've positioned my tank where my rear is facing towards where I'm facing, pointing my turret backwards so that as soon as I get spotted just like that, I can roll forwards and use my great top speed to get out of the line of fire as opposed to using my incredibly mediocre and sad reverse speed in this machine. And having that turret made this tank so much more flexible and really kind of made it into the powerhouse of a tank destroyer I think it is today. The reason I really love the Grille 15, and it's one of my most played tier 10 tank destroyers, and even though I haven't had it for the longest amount of time, is I just think this tank is so well balanced. There's so many tanks in the game that are annoying to play against or annoying to play as or just kind of bad for the game for a number of different reasons. I talked a little bit about it before. When you have tanks with, say, the Jagdpanzer G100, is it a blatantly overpowered machine? No, I don't think so. But when you give a tank 420 millimeters of heat penetration, there's going to be a lot of games where it kind of ruins somebody's experience because they're playing hold down with their strong tank or whatever. And it just doesn't matter. Or if you're playing something like the pre-nerf Tehran, you have ridiculous mobility, DPM, and alpha damage. 950 is kind of ridiculous, and it's really just kind of toxic. And then a tank like the T110E4 with its crazy armor that got buffed, and I plan on doing a video on that machine as well at some point, by the way. But with that and its 375 APCR penetration that most players who play that tank will just spam because there's no reason to use the standard rounds. There's so many kind of toxic traits that tank destroyers have, and while they might not necessarily just be blatantly overpowered, there's just something about them that's kind of broken. And the Grille 15 is kind of a philosophy of a tank I wish was more pronounced in World of Tanks because I just think it's perfectly balanced. If you're the Grille 15 player, this thing will do everything you want it to do for the most part, and with very few exception. And if you're smart with your play and you understand how the tank works, and you look at the enemy team lineup and know where vision is, like you're going to see this game on Erlenberg in the last game, you could really make long lasting games actually become quite enjoyable because you have a lot of different strengths to flex at different times, whether it's your alpha damage you want to trade or if it's your mobility to get up to a position. Obviously, your camo and your view range are really good. And if someone's playing against a Grille 15, I mean, if you get shot by him, yeah, it hurts, but it's only 750. It's not 850 or 950 or 1050 or 1150. It feels a lot more balanced and fair when you're getting shot by this thing to only lose around 750 health. And I think in the perfect world, which this will never happen, I think every tank destroyer in the game shouldn't have more than 750 alpha, with few exceptions. If you wanted to balance them all around 750 alpha and maybe the FE2 and 5B nerf that to like 900 or 950 and give it some better reload, that would be fine. That was an excellent shot there, by the way. This gun, man, it's so great when it works. But the amount of alpha damage this thing has, it's perfectly balanced, and this thing, the penetration, 279 standard, I mentioned it and really kind of talked about it as if it wasn't great, and by way of comparison to other tank destroyers, it certainly is subpar. But I mean, 279 pen is still more than enough to get through most tanks' weak spots if you're aiming right and you have the accuracy to hit weak spots. So I don't even find myself really firing too much premium. And then when you do fire premium, I mean, 330 heat, while it's not 395 or 420. 330 millimeters of penetration is still a really substantial amount of penetration. So it's perfectly balanced. Do you really need more than 330 penetration? At what point do you just have to say, hey, that's not a good target. Let me go shoot at something else, right? And, you know, I really like this tank. I think its strengths are pronounced and balanced. I think its weaknesses are pronounced and balanced, and it's just overall healthy for the game. Unfortunately, that's probably why you don't see too many of these things. It's not the least popular. Oh man, that shot was dirty. By the way, snapping a shot like that with the grill 99 times out of 100 does not work out like that. But I'd like to think because it was an AVRE, Wargaming is still trying to pay us back for the pain and suffering that tank caused when it was released. So we get an automatic plus 50% accuracy against them. Oh, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it anyway. So this tank it's really well balanced. I really like it. Maybe not it's not the most overpowered or great, but I certainly love playing this thing. And this shot right here, I mean, 300 meters through a window, over a hill, into his tracks. If I had to pick a shot in this replay that personifies what I think about this gun, it's that one. When I'm fully aimed, I do feel pretty confident. And there are times, at the end of the day, RNG is RNG. It is ruled to tanks where you'll shoot a fully aimed shot and it'll just go nowhere near where you aimed. But unfortunately, the truth is, you could say that about pretty much every single tank gun in this game because it's RNG, right? So Erlenberg in this map, this game's kind of winding down to an end here, but really liked this game because it really shows you how flexible this tank is. I mean, I'm not, for Christ's sake, I'm working a Ridgeline here in a Grille 15, a tier 10 tank destroyer, and you can kind of do it. You do have okay gun depression. It's not 10 degrees or anything, but it's certainly not horrific either. And you saw the mobility of this machine, how I got around the map from the back and push my way up to work in the middle to push my way up to the hill here and get a little bit of assisting towards the end and kind of help solidify the game. You know, it has that flexibility, and you need to think of your hit points really as an attribute to be traded and kind of used towards the end game. If you can save your hit points, you only have 1800, which is fairly low for a tier 10, but it's still 1800 hit points. You know, if you're on full health and I was fighting that object 430 there, I'd be more than willing to just sit in front of him and trade because, okay, you're going to hurt me, but I'm going to kill you. You still have to chew through 1,800 hit points. So that game there with 6,800 damage, quite a few kills. I think that was, what, 3 kills? And, sorry, 2 kills, and it was only second class mastery. This tank is really hard to get the mastery badge in. And the reason for that, if you didn't know, is usually because you are playing towards the back. If you're dealing damage to tanks that are being spotted for you, you're only getting 50% of the XP and credits because the other 50% is going to the person who's doing your spotting. And that means that tank destroyers and large that are kind of backline tank destroyers, they tend to have a tough time getting high XP games, even if you do a large amount of damage like that, almost 7,000 with 2 kills and some assisting. So this last game I'm showing you here was my most recent one and kind of the last one I wanted to gather. I wanted to gather something where I did maybe not tremendous damage, but definitely a really solid performance and well above my average that I have in tier 10 tanks. So this is Sword Beach, and you guys have seen me post, I think, a few games on here. I know my patent video, I definitely had one that was pretty good, and I'm not a huge fan of this map, and I keep getting good games on it. And I think the reason is just because it's a bit too big for World War II, in my opinion. Um, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's not the horrible kind of big. It's not like Nomenon for it, or yeah, Nomenon. God, I hate that map with a passion. But there's a couple spots you can play this map if you know what you're doing. So I rolled out this game and I moved forward here. And anytime you're in a tank destroyer and you're the most forward tank on your team, it typically does not bode well. So you can kind of see me setting up my little nest here. I'm gonna go ahead and just knock down a bunch of trees to give me some extra camo and concealment because, well, I'm basically playing scout here, and I might have the camo for it, but the problem is if I get spotted, I'm kind of I'm kind of cooked. Spore 103 here. I believe he has the stock turret, which is why I felt comfortable shooting my gun there because he has pretty bad view range, and I don't run the muffled shot equipment on this tank. It's definitely viable, but if for my build, I'd have to go with the rammer, and it's kind of a toss up which one's going to be more useful. And I definitely do enjoy me some rammer and some DPN. So this mouse right here, he was the most mouse of all mouse players. This man knew one thing and one thing only, and that was hold hold left stick forward and go be mouse. And you know what? God bless him, more power to him. Maybe he's like me and doesn't really enjoy this map and want to get it over with. So thankfully here we have some heavy tanks on my right that are moving up to take a bit more of the aggro and probably give a bit more view range. Tanks on the left are kind of setting up, and the team is deployed fairly intelligently here. We did have a light tank, and well, usually what happens with the light tanks on my teams is they tend to be the first ones gone. Unfortunately, there's a misconception where if you're a light tank and you die first on the game, then you get some sort of crazy credit or XP multiplier. I don't know. It happens quite a bit, unfortunately, but we're just kind of working this position here, trying to make our camo work with these bushes I've knocked down and take what shots we can because this tank is great at sniping. You have good accuracy and a punchy gun. I've only done 1,500 damage, but I've only hit two hits. One more shot, I'm at 2,000, and we're pretty much onto an average game. So really easy to rack up the damage, even when you go through long periods of no shots on target. I'm just trying to make the angles work. I'm looking at this chieftain and this IS-7 over there on my left, and that's when I see the mouse that is, once again, he's just mouse things, man. So I figured he's going to push forward, so I really need to make sure I get a shot into him, and thankfully he gives me the side of his turret, and even though 279, like we talked about, isn't spectacular penetration, it's still good enough to get through the side of a mouse turret as long as he's nice and flat like that, right? He does have quite a bit of turret armor, but this gun's still impressive enough to get through it. And that leaves him on 1,000 health. Unfortunately, not a one-shot for me, but I know that if I do get one more shot into him, we could eliminate him. And that's going to relieve a lot of pressure from my position because he's really the only person that's going to be able to consistently spot me. And I try to go forward here. I don't have the gun depression to shoot his lower plate. So I just kind of take a shot of his turret. Hopefully I roll high on my penetration roll. Wasn't a good shot. Hit his manlet. So even with a good pen roll, it probably wasn't going to go through. And now he's kind of in position to counter me. And I moved back a little bit to get this second bush in between us to maybe spot him again and hopefully get that one shot I talked about into him because getting him down to low health is really important. But thankfully for me, he has taken a lot of damage. He's kind of perma spotted where he's at. He doesn't want to play this side anymore. And he's going to go around to the other side of that rock, and the rest of my team is going to be able to deal with him, which is awesome for me because I can get back to just kind of working this long line of sight, looking northern towards their cap where all their guys are kind of camping at. So you see there he's taking damage, and right here I see the enemy Grille 15, and woo, there you go. Nice and easy, 750 in the side and roll back in. And once again there, you see the way that I'm angling my Grille 15 I have been all game. I'm rolling backwards in order to get in position to shoot so that when I get spotted, I roll forwards to get out of the line of fire. And it's really hard to understate how much that 360-degree turret buff really helped this tank out and what it wants to do because it gave it so much flexibility and so many options. So right here, this STRV, he's moving up. And I know as soon as I shoot, he's going to spot me, so I want to make sure I hit my shots. So I had a sliver of his tank, but this gun is more than accurate enough to hit that kind of a shot. And I roll back, guys are moving, I'm rolling backwards. Not what you want to do. Ideally, I would have set up by rotating my tank so I could roll forwards to get out of the line of fire. But again, the unfortunate truth is rotating this and that. I do not approve of that shot. I fully admit it shouldn't have happened, but I was spotted and I was going to run away anyway, so I took it. And if I was IS-7, I'd be a little bit upset, and I can't blame him. That was kind of BS, but this shot right here is going to be a bit better. I go ahead and aim at his side armor, snap a shot into his side, and I roll back into cover. So he's really hurt from that. And we're going to keep playing the stealth game here. So I have a Death Star rolling up here, 215B183. He had a lot of health, and he took quite a bit in the cross. So now he's a one-shot for me. And I think what was going through his head was, his team is not doing particularly well, and if they can eliminate me, you see I'm the only person on this flank now, they could probably continue to roll down the western flank and get a foothold and probably have a better than bad chance at winning this game. But once he took that damage, he became a one-shot for me. And I go ahead and spot his friend, the DBV right here, and shoot him in the turret. That's another tank that's very similar to the Grille. I do like the Grille more, though. It's faster. I think the gun performs a bit better as well, even though I think it has better alpha damage. It's definitely a good tank, though. And here comes the Death Star, and he's ready to shoot me, but I have a great accurate punchy gun, and I shoot that crossbar on top of his tank. If you guys don't know where to shoot a 215B from the front, if you can't see the lower plate, that crossbar up top, really, really consistent penetration, and especially if you have heat rounds, because there isn't too much angling to it, so crap load of penetration will get through there. But we're on 6,400 damage with 1,000 assisting and a kill here. The game's kind of winding down. It's pretty obvious we're going to win. They're all kind of clustered up in the back there. And I don't have much health is kind of my problem at the moment. So I'm deciding here to try and kill this girl. I don't want him to shoot me, obviously. And I can't remember where that STRV is. But once this girl goes down, I decided it's time to go ahead, roll forward here. Use that mobility, use that turret to kind of work a position and see what more damage you can get out of the game. I know the Stritzvon is around here somewhere, so I'm a little bit cautious because they all just went unspotted, so I'm not really sure who's looking at me and who's paying attention. And I'm gonna just wait for shots, and this is kind of classic girl gameplay right here. And that STRV gets spotted, and I overmatch the crap out of his side armor. I do have a 150 mil gun, and as opposed to retreating, going forward here was the right call because there's all this dip in the ground, and I would have gotten here much faster than I would have gotten into cover going backwards. And this STRV, this poor guy, I really kind of ruined his game, and I think I did all of his health and damage as well. All like 1,800 health to him, so I really kind of ruined his day. And they have a handful of tanks here. They have this Ho-Ri, they have this Centauro. Put a shot at the Centauro, kill him, and unfortunately, the Ho-Ri 3 was paying attention and takes me out the game, but that was 8,200 damage, 1,000 assisting, and 3 kills. Really showing what this tank could do. It could scout, it could play the vision game, it could roll forward, it could kind of work ridges if people aren't paying attention, and you're just really flexible with that turret. And, like I said, this tank's been in the game a long time. I still think it's doing very well in 2026. It's certainly not the best. It's not even the best at what it does per se, but what it does very, very well. It's accurate. It's got good DPM. It's stealthy. It's everything you want a tank destroyer to be, and this is kind of my quintessential tank destroyer when I think of what I want him to be in the game. So there you go, 1,500 XP for 8,000 damage and 3 kills. Very hard to get the mastery badge. I have gotten it, but not quite in time for this video. But a really good game nonetheless. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Let me know what you guys think about the Grille 15 down in the comments. Like, subscribe, do all the YouTube things, and I appreciate you guys' patience with me. The videos are definitely going to slow down a bit, but I'll probably try to get out maybe one a week, something like that, going here in the future, because I still do enjoy talking about tanks. So that's all for today. Hope you guys are all right. Until next time, take care of yourselves.